Hello everyone, welcome to Frightful Whispers. I'm here to guide you into the shadows tonight. I know you're using this video to unwind and drift off to sleep. So, before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Where are you watching from? And what time is it for you? Now, get cozy, relax, and let the whispers of the night take over. I never believed in the supernatural. Not really. I always thought people who talked about ghosts, curses, or strange phenomena were just looking for something to explain their unease. That was before I found that old television. I don't even remember what drew me to it at first. Maybe it was the fact that it was so out of place, so forgotten. It was a relic, its screen hazy and weathered, the kind of TV no one would even glance at. But I couldn't resist. I bought it for next to nothing at a yard sale. It wasn't even an impulse buy. I don't know. Something felt different. I brought it home, plugged it in, and waited for something to happen. The screen blinked on, showing nothing but static. I shrugged it off and sat back on the couch, trying to make sense of the eerie hum that filled the room. I was tired, not really paying attention to it, but as the minutes ticked by, I started to notice something, a pattern. Or was it? Something in the static seemed to shift, twist in subtle ways, as if it wasn't just random noise. It wasn't much, just small flickers, things that barely registered in the back of my mind. At first, I didn't care. I thought it was just the aging TV, maybe some electrical fault, but then I saw something. I don't know how to explain it, but there it was, my own face, on the screen. It wasn't just a blur. No, it was me. Sitting on the same couch, the same posture, the same disheveled look I must have had. But the face I saw wasn't the same as mine. It was different, twisted, fear in its eyes. A terror I didn't recognize. I leaned forward, my breath catching in my throat. The image shifted, flickered, and then vanished, as if it had never been there at all. My heart was racing, pounding in my chest. I thought I was losing my mind. I turned off the TV, left the room, tried to shake it off, but the image, that face, it stayed with me. I couldn't forget it. The next few nights I went back, like some kind of strange compulsion had gripped me. I don't know why, but when I turned it on again, the static was waiting for me, like it was alive. And this time, the images were clearer. Faces, shapes, things that weren't supposed to be there. And then I saw it again. Me again. But this time, it was different. I was walking down the street, my eyes wide in terror. I didn't know what I was running from, but I could feel the panic building inside me, as if the very sight of it was driving me mad. My body started to shake, and I slammed my palm against the TV, trying to stop it, trying to escape from whatever was on the other side. But it wouldn't stop showing me things. I began to see things that hadn't happened yet. Small moments. Insignificant things like me spilling a drink on the carpet or running into a stranger on the street, a moment I had yet to experience. But they weren't just glimpses anymore. No, the static started to show me darker things, things that shouldn't have been there. A car accident. My body twisted and broken, lying lifeless on the street. A figure looming over me. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was glued to the screen, my heart hammering in my chest, terrified of what I might see next. But the worst part? No matter what I did, no matter how much I tried to change my actions, the static always updated. It was like it knew what I would do before I even did it. It trapped me in its own twisted version of fate. The images on the screen were like some kind of sick prophecy. The more I tried to avoid the things it showed me, the more they came true. It was like the television was predicting my future, showing me pieces of my life that I hadn't even lived yet. But with every vision, the fear grew stronger, more suffocating. One night, I watched in horror as the static revealed something even worse, something that froze the blood in my veins. I saw myself, not just running or falling, but being pulled toward the TV. My hands stretched out in terror, my body jerking violently, as though someone, was reaching for me from inside the screen. I could feel it. It was like invisible hands were grabbing me, dragging me closer and closer until all I could see was the glowing light of the static. I tried to scream, to fight it, but no sound came. My body wouldn't respond. My limbs felt like they were made of stone. I was helpless. I was trapped. I tried to destroy the TV that night. I smashed it with a hammer, hoping to break free of whatever curse had taken hold of me. But when I raised the hammer above my head, the screen flickered again, and it showed me, right in that exact moment, about to smash the television. My hand was raised, the hammer was poised. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. It knew. It knew exactly what I was going to do, and worse, it showed me that I was helpless against it. That's when I realized. I wasn't just watching the static. The static was watching me. And it wasn't just random images or faulty wiring. There was something on the other side, something waiting for me. And that night, it came alive. The television turned on by itself, the hum of the static louder than ever before. The image on the screen flickered for a moment. My reflection, staring back at me, but distorted. It wasn't me anymore. It was something else. Something twisted, something wrong. I could feel it in my bones. The room around me felt colder, the walls closing in. The static was no longer just an image, it was a presence, a dark force, and it was pulling me in. I don't know how long I sat there frozen, but it didn't matter. It had me. And that's the moment I realized there's no escape from the static. Once it starts, once it finds you, you're nothing but a part of its twisted broadcast, lost forever in the flickering darkness. I don't know how it started. Maybe it was just the old TV, or maybe it was something else, something darker that pulled me in. But that night, I sat there in the same small living room, staring at that static, feeling its strange hum vibrate through my body. The silence around me felt unnatural, like the world outside had faded away, leaving just me and this thing. The old TV, the static, and whatever was waiting for me in that endless white noise. I had been watching it for days, maybe longer, without thinking much of it. But tonight, something felt different. The air in the room was thick, too still, pressing down on me, almost suffocating. I leaned in closer, my face just inches from the screen. It was almost like I could feel the static tugging at me, pulling me in, drawing me closer. At first, I thought it was just the flickering patterns, just the kind of stuff you expect from an old, neglected television. But then, the shapes began to shift. Slowly, unsettlingly. It wasn't random anymore. Someone, was trying to show me something. I blinked, my heart pounding. It was almost like a whisper in my mind, urging me to keep looking to see what was coming next. My fingers were shaking, but I couldn't stop staring. I didn't want to, but I couldn't look away. And then, it happened. The static began to settle, to coalesce into something clearer. And there, staring back at me, was my face. Not just any face, but mine. Twisted, distorted, like a reflection in cracked glass. My breath caught in my throat. The eyes staring back at me weren't mine. At least, not entirely. They were wide, frantic, filled with a terror I didn't recognize. I almost reached out, thinking I could somehow stop it, touch the screen, make it go away. But the moment I moved, the image changed. It wasn't just a glimpse anymore. It stayed. The face on the screen smiled, slowly, eerily, but it wasn't a smile I'd ever make, not one I would ever want to see. I jerked back, my heart slamming against my ribs, the room suddenly cold. A chill ran down my spine, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. My mind screamed for me to look away, but I couldn't. I just couldn't. I wanted to scream, to run, to break the damn TV, but I was frozen, trapped in that moment. The face grinned wider, stretching unnaturally, its eyes never leaving mine. That thing on the screen, it knew something, it knew me, and it was waiting for me. I reached for the remote, my hand trembling, but my fingers wouldn't work. The fear, the dread, the suffocating sensation of being watched, it was all consuming. I hit the power button, desperately trying to turn it off, but the screen didn't blink off. No, the static just buzzed louder, as though mocking me, taunting me, refusing to stop. Then, as if it wasn't enough to show me my own face, it started showing me something worse. Something I didn't recognize. I saw myself running. But I wasn't running from anything I had ever encountered. I was running from something. There was something chasing me. Or maybe I was chasing something. My heart thudded in my chest as I watched myself sprint down a dark alley I'd never seen before. The shadows stretching out, moving like they were alive. My legs were moving faster than I could think, my breath ragged and desperate. But I couldn't see what was chasing me. The fear on my face was so real. I could feel it in my chest, a tightness that stole my breath. I wanted to shout, to warn myself to stop, but I was powerless. I was frozen in place, and then the moment froze too. It was like I was watching a memory unfold. But it wasn't a memory I had, it was a future I hadn't lived yet. I saw myself stumble. A sharp jolt, a collision, and I was thrown to the ground, my body jerking violently against the cold pavement. The shadows around me seemed to close in, and I could almost hear my own heartbeat pounding louder and louder in my ears. The vision cut out, replaced by a burst of static, and then it came back. But this time, I didn't see the alley. I saw myself crumpled on the ground, motionless. It wasn't just a vision anymore, it was a warning, a future, my future, and I had no idea how to stop it. The static on the screen swelled, growing louder and more oppressive, until I could hardly think over the noise. The walls around me seemed to close in, the room growing darker, the air growing colder, heavier. I couldn't breathe. I was suffocating. I tried to turn it off. I tried to break free. But the TV, it wouldn't stop. It kept showing me, kept pulling me in, showing me more, showing me things that hadn't happened yet. It felt like I was being suffocated by the future, as though the static was pulling me in, dragging me into some kind of black hole, and I couldn't escape. I sat there, frozen, as the room around me seemed to vanish into the chaos on the screen. My own face, the twisted version of it, staring back at me with eyes filled with terror. The smile stretching wider, pulling me deeper, until all I could see was that endless static, like a void with no end. I didn't know how to escape. I didn't know if I could escape. All I knew was that whatever I was seeing wasn't just some random glitch. It was something far worse, something that had found me, something that wanted me. And as the static swelled, filling the room with its deafening hum, I realized one terrifying truth. There was no escaping what I was about to become. I thought I had seen everything. At least, I told myself I had. The visions, the static, the twisted version of my face. I told myself it was just a broken TV, just some random glitch in the system. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was happening. Something I didn't understand. And when the TV turned on by itself again that night, I knew it wasn't just some malfunction. It was something else. Something far darker, far more dangerous than I was ready to face. I sat there, staring at the screen, knowing that I couldn't pull myself away, even if I wanted to. My fingers were shaking, but my eyes were glued to the static. That hum, that buzz. It felt like the static was calling to me. My mind raced, but my body didn't move. I was trapped in the moment, waiting, watching, and I could feel the weight of the room pressing in on me. And then, just like that, it shifted. The static didn't stay static anymore. It rippled, like water disturbed by a stone, and for a brief moment I thought I saw something, a figure, moving beneath the chaos, just a flicker. My heart thudded in my chest as I leaned forward, watching intently. The buzz grew louder, the static more frantic, like it was building to something. I could feel it now, a strange, gnawing tension in the air, and then, in an instant, the screen snapped into focus. It was me again, but not the way I was right now. No, it was a future me. I saw myself standing in the middle of a dark street, my face twisted with fear. The street was empty, but the way I was looking around, back and forth, scanning every shadow, every corner, told me everything I needed to know. Something was coming. Something I didn't want to face. I couldn't breathe. My hands were trembling, but my eyes refused to look away. It felt like the screen was pulling me in, like I was already in that place, in that moment, running through that same street. And then, just as quickly as I'd thought it, I saw the car. A black sedan, its headlights cutting through the dark. But it wasn't the car that made my stomach drop. It was the way it was driving. Slow, methodical, like it was looking for me. As it approached, my own legs started to move in the vision. I was walking toward it. I wanted to scream, to run, but in the vision, I couldn't. I was walking closer, closer to the car, and something about the way it moved made my skin crawl. I could hear my heart beating in my chest, each thump louder than the last, like a countdown to something I couldn't stop. My hand, reached for the door handle. I couldn't tear my eyes away. It felt like my heart was about to explode as I saw myself open the door of the car, and then, from the shadows, it stepped out. A figure. Tall, cloaked in darkness, their features hidden beneath a hood. I couldn't see their face. No, I didn't want to see their face. But the way they moved, the way they came toward me, it was like they were a part of the night itself. And I could feel it, feel the presence of something so dark, so cold, it made my blood freeze. I saw myself, me, the future me, reach out to them, hand trembling, as if I didn't have control over my own body. I wanted to scream, to shout, "Don't go to them, don't open the door." But it was too late. The door was open, the figure stepped closer, and then, just as the figure reached for me, the static buzzed, loud and jarring. The image on the screen shattered, flickering violently as if the TV was rejecting what it had shown me. It wasn't a glitch, it wasn't a malfunction. No, it was showing me a path. My path, the one I was already walking. The screen went black, and for a moment everything was quiet. So quiet it was suffocating. My body was frozen, my breath stuck in my throat. I didn't know what to do, I didn't know how to stop it. The visions weren't random anymore, they were predictions. My future, laid bare in front of me. And no matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't change a single thing. I sat there in the dark, my eyes glued to the screen, my mind racing. The future had already been set, the TV had shown me my fate, and I had no idea what would happen next. But I knew one thing for certain, it wouldn't be anything I could escape. I didn't want to look. I knew I shouldn't. But there I was, once again, sitting in front of the old TV, watching the static hum and buzz like a heartbeat I couldn't escape. It had become a nightly ritual, something I couldn't break free from, no matter how hard I tried. The air in the room was always heavy, thick with tension, almost like it was holding its breath, waiting for something I couldn't understand. That night was no different, at least, at first. The static on the screen shifted in its usual unpredictable way. Flickers of white noise, brief flashes of something that never quite made sense. I sat there, transfixed, watching it as if it was a movie I couldn't stop playing, even though I knew better. Something was off, though. I could feel it in my bones, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. And then, it happened. The static, which had been so erratic before, suddenly calmed. The buzzing, which had been like 1,000 voices speaking at once, quieted to a soft hum. I leaned forward instinctively, the breath in my chest coming in short, shallow gasps. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was some sick curiosity, maybe it was fear. But as I stared at the screen, I saw it. It was me. At first, it was a blur, just a flicker in the chaos of static. But then it sharpened. My face, twisted in a way I didn't recognize, filled the screen. My eyes were wide with terror, my mouth open in a silent scream, as if I was pleading for something or someone, pleading for help. But there was no one to hear me. I could feel the panic rising in my chest, just as it had in the vision. I wanted to turn the TV off, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. The image on the screen held me captive, drawing me in, until I couldn't tell where the static ended and my reality began. I reached out, my hand shaking, as I hovered just inches from the screen, desperate to pull away, desperate to stop what was happening. But I couldn't. I couldn't stop watching. And as if the screen knew my fear, as if it fed on it, the image shifted again. I saw myself lying on the ground. I was no longer in my living room. No, this wasn't my house anymore. This was somewhere else. A room that was dark and decaying. The walls were cracked, peeling, covered in a layer of grime that told the story of years, maybe decades, of abandonment. I could feel it, even though I wasn't physically there. I could feel the dust in the air, the oppressive weight of the room pressing down on me, suffocating me. My body was crumpled on the floor, lifeless. My hand stretched out before me, fingers barely touching the ground, as if I had tried and failed to push myself up. The floor beneath me was slick with something dark, the dark, sickly color of blood. I could feel the cold of it against my skin, my fingers freezing as I tried to push myself up. But there was nothing, no strength, no movement. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. I could only watch as the blood spread across the floor, inch by inch, until it surrounded me like a pool. I don't know how long I stayed there, staring at the screen, but I couldn't look away. I couldn't even blink. My body refused to move, to escape the nightmare unfolding before me. I was trapped in that moment, in that place, in that blood. And then I saw it, a shadow in the corner of the room. At first, it was just a silhouette, a figure standing in the darkness, waiting. I could feel its presence pressing down on me like a weight. I couldn't see its face, but I felt it looking at me, seeing me. It was as though it had been waiting for me, for this moment. I watched as it moved closer, the shadow shifting with an unnatural grace. There was no sound, nothing but the rhythmic hum of the static that had become deafening in my ears. I didn't want to see what came next. I didn't want to know. But my body wouldn't obey. My eyes stayed locked on the screen as the figure stepped forward, closer, its features still hidden in the darkness. It was carrying something. A knife. I didn't need to see the blade to know what it was. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the coldness of it, the finality of it. The figure was coming toward me, its hand steady, the knife gleaming in the faint light. My vision blurred, but I saw enough. I saw the figure lean over me, the blade in its hand glinting like a death sentence. I wanted to shout, to fight, to run, but I couldn't. I couldn't even move. I was helpless. And then, as if I had no control over my own body, I saw myself reach up, trembling, to grab the knife. The vision broke. The static flashed wildly and everything went dark. I blinked, my heart pounding in my chest, but the images, those horrifying images, lingered. The taste of fear was in my mouth, sour and metallic. My mind raced, my pulse thundering in my ears as I looked around the room, but nothing felt real, nothing felt like it was mine anymore. I had seen it. I had seen my death. And worse, I knew it wasn't just some random vision. It wasn't a nightmare, it was a prediction. The static had shown me how I would die, when I would die, and what would happen to me. And I knew, deep down, there was nothing I could do to change it. The screen had already decided my fate. I shouldn't have gone back to the TV. After everything I'd seen, everything it showed me, I should have walked away, turned it off, never let it back into my life. But there I was, sitting in front of it again, watching the static flicker, that same humming noise filling the room, wrapping itself around me like a cold, suffocating blanket. I didn't want to watch anymore. I didn't want to see what it would show me next, but I couldn't look away. It was like the screen had a hold on me now, like it knew something about me, something deep down, and it wanted me to know it too. The air in the room had become heavier, almost like the walls were pressing in on me. I could feel it, this strange tension in the atmosphere, like I was on the edge of something I wasn't ready for. The static swirled in front of me. I'd seen it do this before, random patterns, flickers of shapes, nothing really. But tonight felt different. The TV seemed to be waiting for me to give in. The hum of the static grew louder, more insistent, vibrating through my chest, filling my mind with a low, unsettling buzz. It felt like the static was alive, no, not alive, aware, and it wanted something from me. My hands were trembling. I tried to move, to turn away, but my body felt like it was made of stone, like it was too heavy to control. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. The pull, it was stronger than ever. I could feel it like an invisible hand wrapped around my throat, tightening with each passing second. The more I tried to resist, the harder it became to breathe, to think, to move. And then, without warning, it changed. The static stopped being static. It wasn't just noise anymore. The screen ripped open, like a tear in reality itself. The blackness inside the screen spread, creeping out into the room. The noise, the hum, it was like a physical thing now, vibrating through my bones. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding in my chest, my pulse hammering in my ears, as if the sound of my own fear was drowning me. I leaned forward, as if the static was pulling me toward it, like it was drawing me in with an invisible force. My hand, moved on its own, stretching out toward the screen. I didn't want to do it, I didn't want to go closer, but I couldn't stop myself. It was like I was being controlled by something I couldn't see, something I couldn't fight. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, to escape, but my fingers were already brushing against the cold glass of the screen. And then I felt it. The cold. It was sharper than anything I'd ever felt before, like ice cutting into my skin, spreading through my fingers, into my bones. The cold was unbearable. The screen, it wasn't just cold anymore, it pulled at me. Not physically, not with any visible force, but it was there. inside me, twisting through my chest, drawing me in. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. I was stuck, trapped between the TV and the nothingness that seemed to pull at me from the screen. The hum of the static became a roar, deafening, filling my mind, my body. I could feel it in my chest, vibrating through my ribs, pushing me forward. I felt myself leaning closer, closer, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't stop any of it. My body felt light, like gravity was no longer holding me down. My hands reached out on their own, fingers pressing harder against the screen. I wasn't in control anymore. The pull was too strong. And then, I felt something more than cold, a presence, a weight, something on the other side of the screen, something waiting for me. I couldn't see it, couldn't understand it, but I could feel it, like it was watching me, like it knew exactly who I was. A dark, suffocating presence, reaching for me, drawing me closer. I felt it in the air around me, heavy, thick with the promise of something terrible. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone, swallowed by the hum. I tried to pull back, tried to break free, but it was like my body wasn't mine anymore. I couldn't control it. My fingers moved closer, pressing against the glass, the screen pulling me deeper, until all I could see, all I could feel, was the dark void that was swallowing me whole. The darkness behind the screen seemed to grow, spilling out of the edges, flooding the room, until the walls around me were gone, until the very air I breathed felt like it was being consumed by the void. I was being sucked into the screen, into the static, and I couldn't stop it. There was no escape. And then, in the briefest moment of clarity, I understood. It wasn't just the TV that had me. It wasn't just the static. The thing behind the screen, the thing that had been watching me, waiting for me. It had always been there. I wasn't the one in control. I never had been. I had been drawn in, pulled closer, piece by piece, until I was nothing but a part of it, a part of the static. The screen was no longer a screen. It was a trap, a portal, a doorway to something far worse than I could ever imagine. And in that moment, as the static roared around me, pulling me into the blackness, I realized with a sickening certainty that there was no turning back. The static had claimed me, and I was lost forever. The air in the room had changed. I could feel it. The weight, the thickness, the tension hanging around me like a suffocating fog. The familiar hum of the television, which had once been a mere background noise, now pulsed with an unnerving rhythm. It was as though the static was alive, waiting, watching. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it, but the room seemed to close in, the shadows creeping toward me like hands reaching out of the dark. My breath quickened, my body tense with an anxiety I couldn't explain, and yet I couldn't look away. I knew something was about to happen. The TV had already shown me things. Horrible things. Visions of my future. Things that couldn't be real. Things that made my heart race every time I closed my eyes. But tonight was different. The static wasn't just noise anymore. It wasn't just an image flickering on a screen. No, the static itself was changing, shifting, moving, like it had a life of its own. I could feel it, deep in my gut, the same cold, suffocating dread I'd felt before. My body froze as I leaned forward, the room silent except for that growing hum, louder now, like the TV itself was breathing. The darkness in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, the shadows lengthening, merging with the blackness from the screen. My pulse hammered in my ears as I watched, unable to turn away. The static was no longer random. It had become deliberate. It was forming something. I could barely process what I was seeing. It was like the screen itself was breathing, the flickers and flashes distorting in unnatural ways. The air around me seemed to grow colder, heavier. The TV seemed to throb, each flicker of static pulsing like a heartbeat. And for a moment, I thought I could almost hear something. Something faint, like whispers buried deep in the noise. And then, without warning, it happened. The static split apart like a curtain being pulled back, revealing something. No, someone, beneath the surface. I leaned in, my breath caught in my throat. The figure was dark at first, just a shadow, like an outline cut from the blackness. But then it began to take form, growing clearer, becoming real. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine and I gasped, unable to tear my eyes away. It was me. But it wasn't, not really. The version of me on the screen was wrong, twisted. The face was distorted, the eyes wide with terror, lips pulled back in a twisted grin. There was something off about it, like it wasn't human at all. It was like a reflection, but not mine. Something darker, something alien. And it wasn't just watching me. No, it was waiting. That's when I felt it. The air had changed again, the static, the screen. It was no longer just a passive thing, it was pulling me in. My body felt heavy, like I was being dragged toward the TV. I wanted to fight it, to look away, but the force was too strong. The room seemed to vanish, and I was falling, my chest tightening as I felt the invisible pull tightening around me. My hands moved of their own accord, reaching out toward the screen. I couldn't stop them. I couldn't stop myself. The static surged, swirling faster and faster. The figure on the screen stretching, becoming more real, and the darkness inside the TV seemed to grow, swallowing the light from the room. I could feel my body leaning forward, my fingers brushing against the glass. And then I felt it. The cold. It was sharper than anything I'd ever experienced, like ice creeping into my bones, seeping into my skin, spreading out through my entire body. It was as if the screen was no longer just a surface. It wasn't just cold. No, it was pulling me in. The cold from the screen, no, from the thing inside the screen, was reaching into me, freezing me, pulling me toward it. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like the air had thickened to tar, like I was drowning in the very presence of it. And then I saw it. The figure. The thing. The entity. It wasn't just a shadow anymore. No, it had come into focus, revealing itself in all its unnatural horror. It was tall, impossibly tall, its form made of nothing but twisting, writhing static, shadows that curled around itself, like it was part of the screen itself. It was moving in ways I couldn't comprehend, as if its body was constantly shifting, stretching, bending in unnatural ways that defied every law of nature. And then it looked at me. Not with eyes, not with a face, but with something far worse. A presence, an all-consuming force that bore into me, tearing through my mind, my soul. It wasn't just seeing me. No, it was feeling me. It was inside me. The weight of it was unbearable, pressing down on me like a physical force, suffocating me with its presence. And then, through the static, through the sheer terror of the moment, I heard it. Not with my ears, but in my mind. It was a voice, but not a voice at all, a presence, an entity. You belong to me. The words weren't spoken, they were felt. It wasn't the voice of a person, but the weight of something ancient, something dark, something that had been waiting for this moment. For me. The voice burrowed into my mind, filling it with cold, with despair, with the undeniable truth that I was no longer in control. I was no longer me. I was part of it. I was part of the static. And then the screen pulled me in. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My body was no longer my own. I was falling. I tried to fight it. I tried to push myself away, but it was like trying to swim against a riptide. The more I struggled, the stronger the pull became. The figure in the screen was no longer just a figure. It was the static. It was the darkness. It was the end. The last thing I remember was the feeling of my body being drawn into the TV, into the entity, into the static, and then nothing. The static swallowed me whole, and I was lost forever. I knew, deep down, that I shouldn't have returned. After everything I'd seen, everything the static had shown me, I should have walked away, turned the TV off, and never looked back. But there I was, sitting in front of the screen again, that same hum filling the room, my hands trembling on the edge of the couch. The cold air around me felt heavier tonight, like it was pressing down from every direction, and every movement felt sluggish, like something was pushing me into place, into this moment, and I couldn't escape. The room was darker than usual, the only light coming from the flickering screen, but the shadows, they were different now. They seemed to stretch longer, reach further, almost like they had a mind of their own, creeping up the walls, filling the space around me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe without feeling this unbearable weight pressing against my chest. And the static. It wasn't just the usual noise, it was different. It was more like a presence now. Like the static itself had become aware of me, was waiting for me to make a move. I couldn't look away. I knew I should, but something about it, about the way the screen flickered, about the way the hum thrummed in my chest, held me there, paralyzed, unable to turn away from what I knew was coming. And then it happened. The static shifted. It twisted, contorted, more violently than before. It wasn't just flickering anymore, it was moving, as if the screen itself was alive, breathing. My body tensed, every muscle in me screaming to escape, to run, to get as far away from this thing as I could. But I couldn't. I was trapped. The static, the hum, the cold, they all had me pinned, like invisible hands gripping me, pulling me into the screen. I watched, helpless, as the screen distorted further, bending, twisting in on itself. The lights flickered. The shadows in the room seemed to gather, pulling together, forming something more tangible. I couldn't make sense of it at first, but then I saw it. It wasn't just static anymore. It wasn't just noise. There was something in it. Something was breaking through, pushing against the screen, and I could feel it in my chest. My heart was pounding so hard, I could barely hear anything else. It felt like the walls of the room were closing in around me, and every part of me screamed to get out. But I couldn't move. I was trapped. Trapped in this space, this moment, as the thing from the screen slowly began to form. It started as a shadow, just a figure in the darkness. And then, just when I thought I might be able to look away, it shifted. The darkness inside the screen seemed to fold in on itself, and I saw it. A figure, tall and dark, made of nothing but swirling static. The figure moved, but it wasn't like any movement I'd ever seen before. It was wrong. It didn't move the way a person moves. It didn't follow the rules of physics, of space, of time. It bent, twisted, stretched, like the static was its body, like it was made of the screen itself. And then it looked at me. Not with eyes, no, it had no eyes, but I could feel it. I could feel its gaze piercing through me, burrowing into my mind, into my very soul. It wasn't just watching me, it was inside me. Its presence filled the room, like it was suffocating me, wrapping itself around every thought, every breath, every moment of me. And then I heard it. It wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, a thought, something that poured into me, deep into my chest. It wasn't speaking in words, it was speaking in presence, in hunger. A voice that wasn't a voice but a desire, a pull, a need. You belong to me. The words weren't heard, they were felt, And as they hit me, everything around me, the static, the screen, the darkness in the room, intensified. The presence pressed in on me, suffocating, as though the world was closing in, narrowing down, until it was just me and the thing on the screen. The thing that wasn't just on the screen. The thing that had been waiting for me. The thing that had always been there, just behind the noise, just under the surface. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move. The static had grown so loud, so all-encompassing, it felt like my body was vibrating with it, my bones rattling, my chest caving in under its pressure. The room was no longer a room. It had ceased to exist. It had become this, the TV, the static, the entity. I was no longer in a living room. I was in its world, a world made of noise, of darkness, of hunger. I could feel my body, my soul, being pulled toward the screen, toward it. It was dragging me in, and I was powerless to stop it. My hands shot out toward the screen, my fingers brushing against the glass. But it wasn't just glass anymore. It was like the screen was liquid, like the static was alive, reaching through, pulling me through, consuming me. I could hear my own voice in my head, screaming, but I couldn't hear it outside of me. It was trapped inside my mind. Trapped by the entity, trapped by the pull of the static. My vision blurred, and the world around me dissolved into a mess of dark shadows and blinding static, until there was only one thing left. The screen, the thing, the void, and the suffocating, overwhelming pull that had me in its grip. I reached out with everything I had left, but it was no use. It was too late. The entity had me. The static had me. I was no longer in control. I was lost. And there was no escaping it. The TV, the screen, the static, the entity had claimed me. And there was nothing left of me but an echo, a fleeting moment in the dark void that stretched on forever. And in the end, I realized the terrifying truth. I was part of it now, part of the static, part of the entity, and there was no coming back. I never thought it would come to this. I had been staring at the screen for what felt like an eternity. The room, once familiar, had become nothing more than a dim outline in the distance. The TV hummed louder now, not just filling the space around me, but clinging to me. The static, it felt like it was alive. The noise buzzed in my skull, seeping into my thoughts, drowning out everything else. I couldn't look away, even though I knew I should. It had been days since the first vision, the first time I saw that twisted version of myself, eyes wide with terror on the screen. I had seen death, pain, my own destruction, but nothing prepared me for this. The feeling, the sensation of being trapped in this place, it wasn't just psychological anymore, it was real. I could feel it, a weight pushing down on me from every direction, as if the room itself were closing in. The TV was no longer just a screen. It had become something more. The static had always been chaotic, erratic, just noise. But now it felt like something was breathing. The air around me was thick with the pressure of it, and I could feel the walls closing in. I didn't know how much longer I could take it. And then, without warning, the screen changed. At first, it was just a ripple, just a distortion in the static. It flickered like a bad signal, but then it grew. The image on the screen started to twist, the static warping, bending in unnatural ways, until it shaped itself. A figure, a shape, something alive. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. My heart hammered against my ribcage as I leaned forward. I was paralyzed, locked in place, eyes glued to the screen. What was it? What was happening? And then I saw it. It wasn't just a face. No, it wasn't just a human shape. It was me. But not the way I looked now. No, this was different. This was a twisted, warped version of me, staring back through the screen, eyes wide and full of terror. The face, it didn't belong. It wasn't mine anymore. It was wrong. The static around it shifted, writhing like smoke, stretching, pulling. I felt myself leaning forward, my hands reaching toward the screen, but I didn't want to. I didn't mean to. I couldn't stop myself. There was something drawing me in, something pulling at the very fibers of my being. And that's when I realized. It wasn't the screen that was pulling me in, it was the static. The figure on the screen wasn't just staring at me, it was reaching for me. Its hand, distorted by the static, extended out, fingers twitching, beckoning me. I wanted to scream, to pull away, to run, but I couldn't. My body refused to listen. The static, it, had me in its grip. The static didn't just want to show me things, it was trying to take me. I felt the pull deep in my chest, the air around me thickening as I was slowly drawn forward. My hand, without my permission, reached out, my fingertips brushing the cold, unyielding surface of the screen. A shock of cold ran through me, sending a wave of panic racing up my spine. I tried to pull back, but it was like my body was no longer my own. My fingers were stuck to the screen, as if the very glass had become a part of me. The pull grew stronger. The static, the figure, the presence, it was all consuming me. The room was no longer the room. I could feel the walls disintegrating, like they were being consumed by the static. The hum of the screen, the static, it filled the air around me, grew louder, vibrating through my bones. I could no longer see the world around me. I could only see the screen, the figure reaching out for me, the endless blackness behind it. The TV wasn't just pulling me in anymore. It was devouring me. I felt it deep inside, like the very essence of who I was, my thoughts, my fears, my soul. They were being drawn into the screen, being swallowed by the entity inside. It wasn't just the TV, it wasn't just the static, it was part of me now. The edges of the screen flickered and warped, like reality itself was bending and breaking. The static swirled around me, the figure, me, growing larger, twisting into something other, something darker, until it wasn't even human anymore. It was a shape, a form, a presence of pure static that was beginning to stretch beyond the confines of the screen, reaching for me with outstretched hands that were more shadow than flesh. And then it spoke. Not with words, but with a presence. A voice, not of sound, but of feeling. You are mine. The words, if you could call them that, weren't spoken aloud. They penetrated my thoughts, my very soul, like the static itself had taken control of my mind. The entity wasn't just an observer anymore. It was inside me. It was feeding off me. I was a part of it. The darkness behind the screen stretched outward like it was swallowing everything in sight, pulling me into the depths of its void. The pull grew unbearable, like I was being torn in two, my body fighting to hold on to what little was left of the real world, while the static consumed me piece by piece. My body was no longer mine. My thoughts were no longer mine. Everything was fading, slipping into the endless blackness. I reached for the TV, my fingers pressing against the glass. It wasn't cold anymore. It was alive. It was pulling me in, deeper and deeper. I could feel it in my skin, in my bones, in the very fiber of my being. And then, with one final push, I was gone. There was no more room to breathe, no more room to think. There was only the screen, the static, and the cold, relentless presence of the entity that had finally swallowed me whole. And in the end, I realized what it had known all along. There was no escape, no way to fight it, no way to turn back. The static had claimed me, and I would never return. Thank you for venturing into the shadows with me here at Frightful Whispers. Remember, the darkness holds secrets, but also whispers truths to those who dare to listen. If tonight's tale sent shivers down your spine, Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It helps keep the fire of fright alive. Rest easy, but keep one eye open, for the night is never truly still. Until we meet again, stay vigilant, stay curious, and let the whispers guide you.